All right, hi everyone. Welcome to day 2 of this brief tutorial of logic for BIPOC folk who are thinking about taking the LSAT. If you're doing this live with me, I want to apologize that I had some technical difficulties and wasn't able to get some stuff posted to the website that I wanted. But if you're watching this later, that stuff will already be up, so that won't really be relevant. I did want to make a point to show you guys these cool shirts that our organization has. They say the truth will not be whitewashed, and they're available on our Great Plains site. So check them out. They're really cool shirts. All right. So I'm going to start out. Sorry, I accidentally clicked the stop button. I'm going to start out by going over some stuff that is in the document that I wasn't able to post yet. And so hopefully that will make things make a little bit more sense. Okay. All right. Logic project day 2. All right. Our goals for today are pretty simple. We're going to review the information from the document that I wasn't able to get posted. And then we're going to work through as many actual LSAT examples as possible. So to take everything way back to the beginning, because we kind of jumped in the middle yesterday, let's talk about what is logic. So logic is the study of arguments. And there's a very specific definition for arguments. An argument consists of at least 2 premises. Oh, shoot, that's not right. Oh. I'll fix that. At least 2 statements, at least 1 premise, and exactly 1 conclusion. And then an argument also makes an entailment claim. So there's a claim that the truth of the premise entails the truth of the conclusion. So we're to believe that the conclusion is true because the premises are true. So there's that relationship there. If the relationship of entailment is absolute, if it's necessary, we call those deductive arguments usually. And that strength is a function of the form of the argument. So when we talk about formal arguments, we're talking about arguments that make the inferential claim that if the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true, right? And so with those arguments, we talk in terms of validity and invalidity. A valid argument being one where it is the case that if the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. A weaker claim that actually is kind of most everyday arguments is that if the premises are true, the conclusion is likely to be true as well. And that has to do with the content of the premises. And those we consider informal arguments. All right. So when we're trying to identify an argument, we want to be able to look for common premise indicators. So these are all words that knowing their meaning will be very beneficial for you on the LSAT. So some common premise indicators are because, since, given that, as indicated by, for the reason that, owing to. So terminology that suggests that what is being referred to does the work of providing reason or support for something else. So common conclusion indicators are therefore, thus, it must be, hence, entails that, accordingly, consequently, we may infer. So that means that what we're talking about follows, given the truth of the premises. And it's a conclusion that's being supported. All right. It's very useful to know the different kinds of formal arguments. So 3 that I point to here are arguments from math. So if you think about it, so if I were to say, I have 4 apples and I gave 2 apples away, therefore I only have 2 apples left. The reasoning would be, because math. And given the definitions of 4, 2, minus, if those premises are true, the conclusion has to be the case. Right? Arguments from definition are similar. So if something is true in virtue of meeting a definition, if that definition holds and that thing meets that condition, then we know something about that thing. Then there are syllogisms, which are 3-line arguments. So you have 2 premises, 1 conclusion. There are categorical syllogisms. Those make use of the words all, no, some. So all apples are red. This is an apple, therefore this is red. Something like that. Hypothetical syllogisms. So if A then B, if B then C, therefore if A then C. And a disjunctive syllogism. So either or. Either A or B, not A, therefore B. And any argument of those valid argument forms is going to be a valid argument. So whatever you stick into a hypothetical syllogism, it could be, something really silly, if I'm a monster, then I like cookies. If I like cookies, then I'm tall. Therefore, if I'm a monster, then I'm tall. None of that really makes any sense. But if those premises are true, that conclusion has to be true, just in virtue of being an instance of a valid argument form. All right. So to be able to tell whether or not we should be evaluating an argument according to formal or informal standards, so try to figure out what the strength of the inferential claim is being made. There are some words. So if we're going to be formally evaluating, the words necessarily, certainly, absolutely, definitely, must. So you can see how those indicate a necessary entailment relation between the premises and the conclusion. All right, so that in terms of possibility, it's impossible that the conclusion be false, given the truth of the premises. All right. We have some informal evaluation indicator words. So if it says probably, probable, improbable, plausible, likely, unlikely, likely. And if the words aren't there, just, try to go with the interpretation that makes the most sense. All right. And there are different kinds of informal arguments. So predictions, going from claims about the past to claims about the future. Past events can give us very good reason to believe that events in the future will happen, but again, it's not absolutely certain, so it's not a formal argument. It's not making that stronger inferential claim. So arguments from analogy. So you say, this is like this, this is true for that. So because 2 things have something in common, we can use that commonality to reach a conclusion. And there's an associated fallacy of weak analogy. So if the analogy doesn't hold up, if the 2 things don't really actually have enough in common, or if what they have in common doesn't have anything to do with the conclusion, that's a weak analogy. So generalization, so going from knowledge about a sample to knowledge about the whole. So if I have, a bad strawberry in my bowl, I can go from that to saying, well, maybe the rest of the strawberries are bad. Hasty generalization is when you're going from too small of a sample. So the fallacious version of generalization. And that'd be like if I said, well, this one strawberry is bad, therefore all strawberries everywhere are bad. That's too much of a reach. Arguments from authority. So that's when we believe something because an expert says so. That's really important, especially nowadays when people try to think that their Googling is the equivalent of, many, many years of schooling and expertise in a matter. So because an authority says so, if a mechanic, who has been working successfully for many years tells me something's wrong with my car, I have good reason to believe them, right? But there's also, an appeal to unqualified authority. So if my friend who knows nothing about cars tries to tell me what's wrong with my car, I shouldn't listen to them. So it's not likely that what they're saying is going to be true, given their level of expertise. And then causal inferences are also an informal argument. So if you know something about a cause, you can know something about an effect, and vice versa. An associated fallacy of that is mistaking causation for correlation. So just because two things happen at the same time doesn't mean that one causes the other. And we got to be careful not to make assumptions there. All right. And so there are kinds of formal fallacies. I kind of lump them into groups. Fallacies of relevance. All right, so that happens when the premises aren't relevant to the truth of the conclusion. So when people get off topic, or you've heard of ad hominem attacks. So when you attack the person instead of the argument, it's not relevant to the argument itself. Fallacies of weak inductions. So they kind of look like good arguments, but the inferential claim just isn't supported. So where like an appeal to authority could be a good argument, if the authority isn't qualified, that connection between the premises and conclusion is weak. All right. And there are also fallacies of ambiguity. And this has to do with when people play around with the meaning of words in a statement. So equivocation is when you use one word to have two different meanings. And people do this a lot, where they shift between different meanings of words. So that's something to watch out for. All right. I'm just going to briefly go over the structure of some common formal fallacies. One's called affirming the consequent. So these are instances where if you see an argument of this form, you know it's an invalid argument because the form is invalid. So if A then B, B, therefore A. That's called affirming the consequent. And then on the other side, denying the antecedent. So if A then B, not A, therefore not B. All right. I think we're almost done here. All right, so that was just a brief little overview of what's in the document that I didn't get posted. The document goes into a lot more detail, but I just wanted to have that as sort of a basis for when we are about to go over these LSAT questions. So I know that was brief, but hopefully it'll help with this next bit. So I'm going to run through some more actual LSAT questions for the rest of the time. All right, here we're sharing. I picked this question specifically for Keely because she mentioned that the parallel reasoning questions are particularly confusing, and they can be. The one we went over yesterday was more complicated than the one we're going to do today. So hopefully this one will show how using logic can help us get to the answer quickly and easily. All right. So the question says, when the economy is in recession, overall demands for goods and services is low. If overall demand for goods and services is low, bank interest rates are also low. Therefore, if bank interest rates are not low, the economy is not in recession. Which of the following does the reasoning most closely parallel the reasoning in the argument above? All right, so first step, we need to identify the form of the argument above. And to do so, we need to figure out what the argument is. What are the premises? What are the conclusions? All right, we see the word therefore. All right, so we know what comes after therefore is going to be our conclusion. All right, so therefore, if bank interest rates are not low, the economy is not in recession. All right, so we can go not low, then not in recession. All right, and let's see what premises we use to get there. All right, so the first is when the economy is in a recession, overall demands for goods and services is low. So if we're in a recession, then demand is low. All right, next one. If overall demands for goods and services is low, bank interest rates will also be low. So that's low. Then I screwed up and was using, this is an important point. They do seem to use the same letter a lot in the questions, which makes it harder to keep track of what you're doing in terms over here. So if it helps you to keep notes, low interest will be I, low demand, L, recession, R. All right. So back to the argument. So when the economy is in recession, demand for goods and services is low. Demand and good for services is low. Bank interest rates are also low. So the conclusion says if bank interest rates are low, then we're not in a recession. All right. So this is the form of the argument. All right. I'm going to briefly go off on a little bit of a tangent before we get into answering the questions, just to show you a couple things. All right. So here's our argument. Where is that? Just going to show you how we prove this argument. All right. This, as we talked about earlier, is a hypothetical syllogism. So it's a valid argument form. R then L, if L then I. Therefore, if R, then I. And we know this because it's an instance of a hypothetical syllogism. All right. If R then I is logically equivalent to if not I, then not R, we're allowed to make this substitution because these, there's a fly bothering me. These two statements are logically equivalent, and they're actually called, I think, transposition. So that's our justification there. So from the truth of the premises and rules of either inference, which allow us to appeal to instances of valid argument forms, or rules of replacement that allow us to substitute logically equivalent statements, we can prove our conclusion using natural deduction. All right, one more thing. I just wanted to show you, actually two more things. Okay, so if we look at the complete truth tables for these two statements, so all the possible combinations of truth values, we see that they have the exact same combination. So it's that relationship that allows us to do the logical substitution that we did. Okay, one more quick thing, because I like truth tables a lot. Just to show the validity of this argument. All right. So when we're testing for validity, the only combination of truth values we're interested in is whether or not there can be true premises and a false conclusion. Because for an argument to be valid, it's impossible that the premises are true and the conclusion false. So we're going to see if that is in fact possible. All right. Conditionals are true in 3 ways, but only false in 1. So we're going to start assigning truth values here. All right, if this is going to be false, then not I needs to be true, which would make I false. Not R needs to be false, which would make R true. So R is true. I is false. All right. If this is to be true with the false consequent, L would need to be false for this to be true. But if L is false, this is false. So we've shown that it's impossible for the premises to be true and the conclusion false. It's kind of cool how we can go from, the words in that question to showing it this way, but we can really see the validity there. All right. But back to the question at hand. So we have our argument form. Now we can go through and try to find which of the examples matches the form. All right, so we look at the first one. If the restaurant is full, the parking lot is full. All right, if the parking lot is full, the restaurant is full. All right, just looking at that, we can see that there's only 2 terms. See how here in the first one they share a middle term? Yeah, so that one's not going to work. Let's try the next one. All right, if the fish is ready, then it's cooked all the way through. If it's cooked all the way through, then it's white. All right, therefore, if the fish is not white, then the fish is not ready. Oh, look, and we can see how the structure is the same. We have hypothetical syllogism, and our conclusion is a transposition of that. All right. So B is our answer. All right. We can just briefly look at the other ones really quick to see why they are not the answer. So if pterodactyls flew by flapping their wings, then they must be warm-blooded. So if they're cold-blooded, they must have flown by gliding. Yeah, there's too many different things there. If they flew at all, no. Right? If you want to put in pleats, you have the double amount of material for your skirt, and that means you have none left for the top. So if you put in pleats, you will not be able to make the top. Looks the same, but if you see how in the conclusion we have the negations there, you don't have that one there. All right, E. If economic forecasters are right, there will be inflation. If there's inflation, the governing party will lose the election. So if it does not lose the election, the forecasters are right. That one looks kind of close. Let's see if it holds up. So if forecasters are right, then there will be inflation. There's inflation, then they'll lose the election. So therefore, if they lose the election, the forecasters are right. And we can see that's not the same, right? It's not the negation, so that that is not the right answer. But keep in mind, they will do things like E, where they have the subject matter kind of match the matter in the prompt question. So because the question is about the economy and recession, people might be tempted to go with E because that's also about the economy. But keep in mind that it's the form we care about, not the content. So B is right, even though B is about fish, because it has the same structure. All right. Let's try the next. 1, 2, 3. Oops. All right, let's try this one. Broadcaster. Our radio station has a responsibility to serve the public interest. Hence, when our critics contend that a recent expose of events in the private lives of local celebrities was excessively intrusive, we can only reply that the overwhelming public interest in these matters makes it our responsibility to publicize them. All right. So this argument, notice, there's an absence of any indicators that we're working with a formal argument. And it makes most sense, right, to interpret it as more of a causal explanation, right? This is why we're doing this, all right? So we look at the prompt again. The conclusion indicator, hence, tells us that what follows is the conclusion. There's a lot of letters there. But we kind of simple it to intrusion, justified, because public interest. All right. There's only one other sentence, so we know that that's our conclusion, or our premise. So let's see. All right, let's write down our premise. So our radio station has a responsibility to serve the public interest. All right. All right. So if we think back to our informal fallacies, right, because the question is asking which of the following is a flaw, we know we're looking for something wrong with the argument. We notice right away that our premise and our conclusion are attempting to kind of appeal to definition, right? So we've got public interest here, public interest here. So the premise is saying we have a responsibility to serve the public interest. Therefore, this action was justified because it was in the public interest. All right. Up here, when we're talking about a responsibility to serve the public interest, what we're talking about is, those things that are in the best interest of the public. When we talk about here, saying our action was justified because of public interest, what we're saying is that the public is interested in what's going on. So here we have public interest being used to mean in the best interest of the public. And here we have public interest meaning what the public is interested in. So we're switching back and forth between a word. And so there's some equivocation going on. All right, so let's look at the example and see which indicates that the flaw is equivocation. All right, so which of the following is a flaw in the broadcaster's defense of the radio station's practice? A, assuming without argument that there's a right to privacy. B, ignoring grounds for criticism in the expose aside from intrusion into people's private lives. No. C, intentionally failing to specify what is meant by excessively intrusive. No. Confusing legal responsibility with moral obligation. No. Improperly exploiting an ambiguity in the phrase public interest. There it is. All right. So we can see that E is our answer. All right, let's keep going. All right, let's look at this one. All students at Pitcomb College were asked to label themselves conservative, liberal, or middle of the road politically. Of the students, 25% labeled themselves conservative, 24% labeled themselves liberal, 51% labeled themselves middle of the road. When asked about a particular set of issues, however, 77% of the students endorsed what is generally regarded as a liberal position. If all of the statements above are true, which of the following must be true? All right, we see the word must. So we can work on the assumption that what we're working with is a deductive argument. So the argument being true in virtue of its structure. So we see a lot of numbers. That could tip us off that perhaps this is going to be an argument from mathematics. All right, so let's get our numbers figured out. All right, so 25% of the students are conservative, 24 liberal, 51 middle of the road. All right, and then we have 77 who endorse a liberal position. All right. So let's look at the numbers and math a bit. All right. So we can operate under the assumption that all the liberal people are I'll come back to what I was going to say. Let's assume all the liberal people endorse that liberal position, and let's assume that all the middle of the road people endorse it. All right. So even if every liberal identifying student and every middle of the road student endorse that position, it's still the case that there were some of the conservatives who must have endorsed the position. All right. So if every liberal and every middle of the road endorsed the position, that still wouldn't be enough to represent or to account for the number that we have here. So it must be the case, given math, that, you know, at least some conservatives endorsed this position. All right. That is what the math tells us. All right, so let's look at the question and see if that is represented in the answers. All right. So our possibilities are for which of the following must be true, so necessarily. All right. Students who labeled themselves liberal endorse what is generally regarded as a liberal position on a set of issues. That's not what we're saying here. More students who labeled themselves middle of the road opposed what is generally regarded as a liberal position on that set of issues. No. The majority of students who labeled themselves middle of the road opposed what is generally regarded as a liberal position on that set of issues. No. Some students who labeled themselves conservative endorsed what is generally regarded as a liberal position on that set of issues. Well, that's what that says. Some L endorse position. All right, so we know our answer is D. And look at E. Some students who labeled themselves liberal endorsed what is generally, yeah, that doesn't have to do with what we're being asked. So just by looking at the math, we can know that our answer is D. And we know that we're looking at the structure because we're talking about necessity, so what must be true. All right. All right, let's try this one. Using clean coal technologies to repower existing factories promises ultimately a substantial reduction of polluting emissions and will affect the full range of pollutants implicated in acid rain. The strategy of using these technologies could cut sulfur dioxide emissions by more than 80% and nitrogen oxide emissions by more than 50%. The emission of a smaller quantity of nitrogen pollutants would in turn reduce the formation of noxious ozone in the troposphere. Which of the following statements is an inference that can be drawn from the information given in the passage? All right. I picked this one because it's a good example of how they use a lot of complicated language to make things, trickier than they have to be. But we're gonna push through it, not even care what the science is talking about, and kind of look at the structure of the argument. All right. So it says using clean coal technologies to repower existing factories promises ultimately a substantial reduction of polluting emissions and will affect the full range of pollutants implicated in acid rain. All right, so we can loosely translate that as a conditional because of the promise. So if we do this, so if this technology is used, then we're going to get a reduction of emissions and will affect the full range of pollutants implicated in acid rain and acid rain reduction. All right. I'm not using the proper logical form right now. I'm just trying to get the information down, and sometimes that's enough to see the structure. All right. So if we use this technology, we can reduce emissions. I'll put that, and affect and acid rain reduction. All right. The strategy of using these technologies could cut sulfur dioxide by more than 80% and nitrogen oxide emissions by more than 50%. Not sure if those numbers are going to be needed, but we'll put them down. So again, if we're using this technology, then cut sulfur by 80 and nitrogen oxygen, cut nitrogen by 50. All right. And then we have the emission of a smaller quality of nitrogen pollutants would in turn reduce the formation of noxious ozone in the troposphere. So when we say in turn, we can think in terms, again, of conditional. So something, doing something because we consider being a condition for something. All right, so the emission of a smaller quality of nitrogen pollutants, which is this one. So if we do that, then we can reduce the formation of noxious ozone in the troposphere. Reduce ozone. All right. So from all this information, what can we gather? All right, so we've got some conditionals here. And we can see that the one thing that they have in common is that using this tech, so the clean coal technologies can help reduce the ozone stuff. Got a couple conditionals. Logically, what we can do with those are link them if they share a term. So that's what we're doing. All right. So let's see if the answers are something of this form. All right, so which of the following statements is an inference that can be drawn from the information given in the passage? A, sulfur dioxide emissions are the most dangerous pollutants implicated in acid rain. Didn't say that. Noxious ozone is formed in factories by chemical reactions involving sulfur dioxide. We've not learned that. 20% of the present level of sulfur dioxide emissions in the atmosphere is not considered a harmful level. Didn't say that. A substantial reduction of polluting emissions will be achieved by the careful design of new factories. Not even talking about new factories, so no. E, the choice of technologies in factories could reduce the formation of noxious ozone in the troposphere. Okay, so using this technology, so the choice of technology could reduce the ozone. E. All right, so we know that our answer is E. And I wanted to go with this one because, again, we got complicated language, science, numbers that we don't even really have to use because what we're looking at is the structure of the argument. But this also highlights a feature of a valid argument form, that valid arguments are not informative. They're truth preserving. So we're not getting anything more out of the premises than is there. You can see we're showing relations between the parts, but we're not bringing in any new information to get to our conclusion. And that's important to keep in mind because it can help eliminate questions, because what is going to be validly, legitimately inferred is not going to contain any new information. So when we're reading through the questions and it's telling us new stuff or information that isn't in the prompt, we know that can be eliminated. Oh. Yeah, so keep that in mind. Deductive reasoning isn't going to give you new information. All right. And then I want to try. All right, you should be able to get through this one in the last little bit. All right, so roses always provide a stunning display of color, but only those flowers that smell sweet are worth growing in a garden. Some roses have no scent. Which of the following conclusions can be properly drawn from the passage? All right, so we see properly drawn. That indicates that we are talking about the strongest entailment, a deductive argument in which the truth of the truth of the conclusion necessarily follows from the truth of the premises given the structure of the argument. All right. So when we look at this one, we can see that we're talking about categories of things. So this would be a good question to use Venn diagrams on. All right, so let's look at the categories that we have. All right, we have roses, always provide a stunning display of colors, but only those flowers that smell sweet are worth growing in a garden. Some roses have no sense. So we have roses, we're talking about roses. Flowers that provide a stunning display of color. We're just gonna play stunning color. And flowers that smell sweet. All right. So we have 3 categories here. We can do a Venn diagram featuring 3 circles, showing the areas of overlap between these categories. All right. So let's look at our premises. Roses always provide a stunning display of color. So all roses, we can change this into proper categorical form. All roses are things that display a stunning display of color. So all roses are C. All are C. Some roses have no scent. So some are not S. And then we would need to figure out what we can conclude from that. All right. So we're going to take this information here and plug it into our Venn diagram. All right. When doing Venn diagrams, if there's one universal and one particular, always graph the universal first. So all, making a universal claim about roses, all R are C. So that means that there are no roses that are not colorful. So what we're going to do is shade in this area here. All right. So that means there's nothing that's a rose that doesn't also provide a stunning display of color. All right. We have some roses have no scent. You guys, I read this too fast and hold on. Ugh. Forget what I said, sorry. Most Venn diagrams have 3 circles. This one's gonna have 4. I forgot about the growing in a garden category of stuff. So we have roses, just real quick. Roses, colorful, sweet smelling. All right, worth growing in a garden. I just remembered why I picked this one, because it's a rare 4-circle Venn diagram worthy. All right, so 4 circles this time, and just make sure they all overlap. Okay, not a lot of room in my areas, but I'll make this work. Okay. Go back to all R C. So only those roses that smell sweet are worthy of growing in a garden. I missed that part of the sentence. So that means it's necessary for a rose to smell sweet to grow in a garden. So all things that are worthy of growing in a garden are sweet. Some are not sweet. And then we're going to see what we can conclude. Sorry about that. Yep. R, C, S, W. Okay. All roses are sweet. You can do that again. So look at the area between roses and sweet things. Shade that out. Oh, sorry. All roses are colorful. I'm doing this wrong. No. Just kidding. All right. All roses are colorful. Okay. All right. All things worthy of growing in the garden are sweet. All right. So there's nothing that is worthy of the growing in the garden that is not also sweet. And we have some roses are not sweet. So some are is not S. So there's going to be something in R outside of S. Oops, sorry. That's supposed to be colorful too. I missed my circle there. Okay. All right, so we've got our premises graphed here. Finally, all of our premises. All right, so what information does this show? Let's look at the options. So some flowers which provide a stunning display of color are not worthy of growing in a garden. It doesn't not say that, but it doesn't say it. All flowers with no scent provide a stunning display of colors. So all C, I'm sorry. So all flowers outside of S are C. I don't see that. Some flowers which are not worthy of growing in the garden have no scent. So something outside of W is also outside of S. Oh, and that is true. Like, we see that, right? There's something outside of W that is where's it gone? Something outside of W that is also outside of S. We have some roses which smell sweet are not worthy of growing in a garden. You know what, you guys? Check the time quick. All right. We only have 2 minutes left, and I didn't make this big enough or build in enough to properly show you the stuff. So what we're going to do is start on this one tomorrow, because this is something that will be really useful. So for questions like these, being able to do Venn diagrams is going to be really important. I will show you that tomorrow. We'll start out with that. I will say that one thing that is important when doing Venn diagrams is to do them neatly, because they're a visual representation. And so I trying to modify as I went along made mine not look right, and not looking right has serious logical implications. So sorry if I confused you with that. I will go over it tomorrow I'll go over it tomorrow properly and draw things out in a more clear way, so I can show you how to use those Venn diagrams to answer those questions. All right, so it is 5 o'clock and I'm really sweaty. I'm really sorry. Our air conditioning is loud, so I turned it off so you could hear me better. And it is really hot in here, so I'm very sweaty. But yeah, tomorrow we'll start with the Venn diagram and go over how to answer questions using those. I'll try to get everything up on the website tonight. I don't know why it's so confusing. I was thinking I could just, push a few buttons and up it would go, and that's not working. But I'll try to get that up there. And then, yeah, tomorrow we're going to go over more examples. Of course, always email me with any questions. I'm going to drop my email in the chat again. It's jengelking@greatplainsaction.org. All right, and thank you everyone for showing up. Tomorrow will be our last day with this little mini tutorial, so we'll continue going over the stuff that we were working on today. And I do hope to expand this into a larger class in the future. So this is just the beginning in a project that I hope will grow and become more and more useful as more people get involved and we have more resources to offer. So thanks everyone for being here in this beginning process. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all tomorrow. All right.